Bandits destroy a widow's windmill, unaware she's set deadly water traps across her ranch out beyond Dry Creek, where the land cracked under the summer sun and the wind carried the smell of dust and horses, stood the Harper Ranch. It wasn't much to look at, just a sagging house, a few skeletal fences, and an old windmill that groaned with every breeze. But it was home to Martha Harper, widow of Tom Harper, the best trapper west of the Pecos. When Tom died 2 winters back, folks figured Martha would sell the place and move into town like the other widows did. But she stayed, tending the ranch alone, her dog Rufus the only company. Word how did she spend her days digging strange trenches and hauling water in buckets, setting up who knew what around her land. Folks called her a crazy old bird. Then the Rourke gang rolled into Dry Creek. 6 men, hard and mean, riding under a scorched black banner. They robbed the bank, burned the sheriff's office, and shot anyone who got in their way. When they heard about the widow living alone just a few miles out, they figured they'd have themselves an easy score of supplies, horses, maybe even gold hidden away. They rode out to the Harper place at dawn, guns slung lazy across their saddles. Martha saw them coming from a mile off, just black dots on the horizon at first. She didn't run. She didn't even hide. She simply tied her apron a little tighter, set a pot of coffee on the stove, and waited. The Rourkes stormed up the hill whooping and hollering, circling her windmill like buzzards. One of them, Jeb Rourke, the youngest, pulled a stick of dynamite from his saddlebag and, laughing, lobbed it at the old windmill. The explosion shattered the morning calm. Wood splinters rained down like needles, and Martha watched her windmill fall with a heavy heart. It had pumped her water for years. But the Rourke celebration didn't last long. When they pressed farther onto the property, something strange happened. Their horses, nervous already, began bucking and screaming. One horse slipped into what looked like solid ground, only to find itself trapped in a deep, water-slick pit lined with sharpened stakes. The poor animal shrieked, tossing its rider into another hidden ditch. The bandits cursed and fired blindly into the dust. But Martha's traps had no mercy. Tom had taught her well where to dig, where to flood, how to set hidden snares triggered by the weight of a man or horse. In a drought-scorched land, no one expected water traps. The Rourkes found themselves staggering into pits that swallowed them whole, stepping on thin layers of sand stretched over pools that sucked them down like quicksand. 3 went down before the others realized they were standing in the middle of a battlefield they couldn't even see. Panicked, they tried to retreat, but the way back was worse. Heavy nets hidden beneath puddles whipped up around their legs, yanking them into deeper traps. One got caught by a spring-loaded cage hidden beneath a cattle trough. Another, scrambling for cover, slipped into a dry-looking ditch that suddenly collapsed, dropping him straight into a pit of broken glass and thorny mesquite. In the end, only one Rourke brother made it back to his horse. He galloped toward town, bloodied and babbling about a witch's land, never stopping to look back. Martha stepped out onto her porch, shotgun cradled in her arms. She watched the sunrise turn the sky blood-red over her wrecked windmill, a small smile playing on her lips. Dry Creek would rebuild. Her windmill could be fixed. But the Rourke gang would never come riding again. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the misty haze over Harper Ranch. Martha didn't move from her porch. She watched, patient as a hawk, as the remaining Rourke struggled, though still breathing anyway. 2 were still alive, Jed Rourke, the gang's leader, and his brother Curtis, a brutal giant of a man. Jed dragged Curtis free from one of the spike pits, cursing and bleeding from a dozen cuts. His sharp eyes scanned the ground, wary now, as he realized they were deep inside enemy territory, and the enemy was a quiet old woman with a scattergun and a mind like a steel trap. "You think you're clever, old hag?" Jed hollered across the ranch, spitting blood. "You think you can beat us? You're dead." Martha didn't answer. She just took a slow step down from the porch. Jed snarled and lifted his rifle, but as he shifted his weight, the ground beneath him gave way. A hidden water trap collapsed with a whoosh, dragging him waist-deep into a pit so slick with mud he couldn't pull free. He screamed curses, thrashing like a drowning rat. Curtis, half-crazed, roared and charged at Martha across open ground. Martha didn't flinch. She calmly raised the shotgun to her shoulder. Boom. The first barrel roared. Curtis stumbled but kept coming, a bull blinded by rage. She cocked it again. Boom. The second shot caught him clean, spinning him to the dirt where he lay groaning, his strength bleeding out into the thirsty ground. Jed, still stuck, watched it all with wide, desperate eyes. Wait, he screamed. "We can work this out. We got money. I can pay you." Martha walked toward him, boots crunching over dry gravel, her face hard as sun-baked clay. "You already cost me more than money could fix," she said, voice low and steady. "You destroyed my windmill. My husband's windmill." Jed's eyes widened. Please." Martha knelt beside the pit and stared down at him. "You boys think you're wolves," she whispered. "But this land's got bigger predators than you." Jed tried to climb out, clawing at the muddy edges, but Martha pulled a flask from her pocket, uncorked it, and poured a clear, sharp-smelling liquid onto the rim of the pit. Jed smelled it immediately. Kerosene. "No, no, please," he begged. Martha struck a match. It flared to life with a sharp hiss. "This is my land," she said, and she dropped it. The fire flashed over the kerosene in a sudden whoosh, igniting the muddy water in a furious burst. Jed's screams were carried away by the rising smoke. When it was done, Martha turned away without a word. She walked back to her porch, reloaded her shotgun, and sat down in her old rocking chair. Rufus, her old dog, came and laid his head on her boots, calm as ever. Dry Creek would talk about this day for years. Some would call Martha Harper a witch, others a legend. But no one ever tried to cross Harper Ranch again. The sun had barely crested overhead when the new sheriff rode up. Sheriff Amos Clay, a young buck with a badge barely 2 months old, had been trailing smoke since he left town, his horse lathered and breathing hard. He slowed when he reached the Harper gate, eyes darting to the torn-up earth, the pit still smoking, and the blackened bodies half hidden among the dust and blood. He tugged his hat down low and spat nervously into the dirt. Martha rocked slowly on her chair, shotgun laid across her lap like a sleeping cat. She didn't rise to greet him. "Mrs. Harper," Sheriff Clay said, voice tight. "You, had some visitors." Martha said nothing, just sipped from a chipped tin cup of cold coffee. The sheriff cleared his throat and shifted in his saddle. "Town heard the Rourkes were headed your way. Looks like you took care of it." Martha set the cup down on the porch rail with a hollow clink. "Had to," she said simply. "They destroyed my windmill. Threatened my land." Clay nodded, swallowing hard as he stared at the battlefield around him. He knew the Rourkes. Everyone did. They'd left a trail of burned-out towns and widowed families stretching 3 counties wide. If anything, Martha Harper had done the law a favor. Still, there were rules. Procedures. "You know, Mrs. Harper," he said carefully, "by rights, I'd be expected to arrest you. Bring you in for questioning at least. Dead men out here. That's serious business." Martha's gaze, steady and cold, pinned him to the saddle. "You want to arrest me, Sheriff Clay?" she asked, voice mild as a spring breeze. "You go right ahead." The young sheriff hesitated, looked at the traps, the bodies, thought about the town, about how the Rourkes had gunned down good men in the street, thought about the little old lady sitting with a loaded shotgun, her dog lying peaceful at her feet. Finally, Clay shook his head. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "I reckon justice has already been served." He tipped his hat, turned his horse, and rode back toward town without another word. Martha sat and watched him go, her heart heavy, her spirit grim. She hadn't asked for this war. But in the wild places, far from the courts and the politics, there were only 2 kinds of folk, those who defended what was theirs, and those who got buried. When the sun finally set behind the ridge, painting the sky in fire and gold, Martha Harper stood up, took her husband's old spade from the barn, and started digging. She would lay the dead to rest herself. Because out here, on Harper Ranch, justice wasn't something you waited for. It was something you made with your own 2 hands. Years passed. Dry Creek grew from a battered outpost into a real town. Wooden sidewalks, a brick courthouse, even a schoolhouse where children learned their letters instead of the sound of gunfire. The scars left by the Rourke gang faded into memory. But one name never faded: Martha Harper. Old-timers at the saloon told newcomers about the widow of Dry Creek, the woman who had turned her ranch into a graveyard for outlaws. They spoke of her cunning traps, her cold eyes, her steady hands. Some said she still patrolled her land every morning with her dog Rufus at her side. Others swore she laid new traps every full moon, just in case some fool thought to test her. No one dared to find out. Outlaws whispered her name like a curse. Bounty hunters crossed themselves when they passed Harper Ranch. It didn't matter that Martha never sought fame, never told her story. Legends grow wild on the frontier, like weeds through dry stone. One summer evening, long after Rufus had passed and Martha's hair had turned white as prairie cotton, a fancy-looking man rode up to her porch. A newspaper man from Chicago, carrying a leather notebook and dreams of selling dime novels back east. He asked her for an interview. "Folks say you're a legend, ma'am," he said eagerly. "The widow Harper, the woman who beat the Rourke gang single-handed. Is it true you set traps that could drown a man without a drop of rain?" Martha leaned back in her rocking chair, squinting into the sunset. She smiled, a thin, secret smile, and said, "Son, if you have to ask, you're standing on the wrong porch." The newspaperman didn't stay long, and Harper Ranch remained what it had always been, a patch of hard, stubborn land, guarded by the last true predator the frontier had ever known.